Okay, we are live on another edition of the Edlow podcast. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. I say it 3 times every time. People are probably tired of hearing me say that. Um, so today is another special one. I've known Johnny George. Johnny, how long have I known you now?
I don't even know, man. I was trying to think about that earlier. It's been a long time.
Yeah, we've known each other a long time, just through circles of wrestling and
And
whatnot.
whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and and also see you at the Kings games quite a bit because you work for the Kings, so
Yes, I
that's
do.
cool. We see each other there,
Hmm.
my good buddy brother Brigham seems to know a guy you have a striking resemblance to.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
heard they know each other.
yeah. So we got some ties, but the reason I wanted to have you on here was because you have a very interesting story, um, particularly when it comes to the passing of your daughter, and I know that is something that you are very you're passionate about. You constantly you I wouldn't say constantly, but you are frequently posting about it on social media, and when I see it I can tell that it's hurting, as it should. And so my understanding, Johnny, is that your daughter was murdered. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, she was. It's been 1,742 days, and it's weird because I count every day, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like anytime someone can ask me how many days has it been since your daughter died, I can tell them every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 1,742 days of hell.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, let's back up a little bit. I want to
Hmm.
know a little bit about you before we kind of get into that story. And so tell me, where did you grow up? Tell me about your family makeup.
Well, yeah, I grew up in the Paso Heights, North Sacramento area.
Mm,
Pretty much the ghetto. I grew up with a big family. My father is actually and my mom got divorced when I was a baby, and
mm,
a man named Danny George took over and became my dad.
mm,
Um, and my all my brothers and sisters are his natural kids, but he never he never treated me like I wasn't his natural kid. I was his
mm,
first son.
mm,
Unfortunately, Mr. Danny George had a really bad drug problem.
mm,
He had a really bad anger problem.
mm,
Um, he used to beat my mom pretty much on a daily basis.
mm,
So my brothers and my sisters and I had to like watch that. Not so much my sister and my younger brother, but me
mm,
and my brother Daniel George. We got to see we had to see it a lot.
mm. Real quick, going back to Del Paso Heights, what high school did you go to?
No, Grant High School.
You went to Grant. Okay.
Hmm.
What year were you born?
I was born in 1969.
Oh, okay. All right.
Hmm.
My reason bringing it, my dad's older than you,
Hmm.
but my dad grew up in Del Paso Heights. He went to Norte del Rio,
Yeah.
so familiar with the area. It's a rough area for those of you who are outside of Sacramento. Del Paso Heights is probably outside of Oak Park. I think they rival each other as kind of the roughest areas of Sacramento. So what about in Del Paso Heights? Like, what were your nearest like major streets that you lived in?
I kind of lived all over, but I mainly lived in an area called the Flats, which is
Mm,
off of Norwood Avenue over there.
yeah.
It's right before they say it's right before you go over the bridge into Strawberry Manors in Del Paso Heights.
Hmm. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were your mother's first child, and then how many brothers and sisters came after you with Danny George?
Two brothers and a sister.
Okay, so there's four of you total. All
Hmm.
right. And how old were you compared to the next oldest kid?
Well, so like my next oldest brother was born in 1973, so I was
Okay.
about 4 years older than him, actually about three and a half.
Hmm.
And then my sister wasn't born until like 1980.
Oh, okay. So a
Yeah,
big gap.
there was a gap there. Yeah.
That's interesting because my I'm very similar. I come from four. I'm the oldest. I have a brother who's 5 years younger than me, a sister who's 10 years younger than me, and a sister who's 21 years younger than me. So I know the gap game. It's interesting when you're in different areas of life all the time. It's hard to kind of connect a little bit, you
Yeah.
know. Were you close with your next youngest brother?
Yeah, him and I were really close. And I'm like still like I'm still kind of close with my sister right now. I mean, she only lives probably about 2 miles from me right now.
Mm, mm,
But my younger brother Daniel, who I was close with, he was younger. We don't really talk so much anymore.
mm. Just some family strife.
Just family strife, and I mean, he's had his journeys in his life, just like we all have, and some of his journeys have led him in some really crazy places, you
Mm,
know. But
yeah.
he seems, I mean, these days, I mean, when I do talk to him, he seems to be God centered and doing really well, and he's got a lot going on for himself. And
Hmm. Yeah.
I watched my brother Daniel go through a lot of different religions growing up.
Mm, mm,
Okay, I mean, he went through at one point. He went through. He was going to be a Mormon at one point.
okay. Uh-huh.
He actually was, going. He was going door to door. You know more about it than I do,
Sure.
obviously. But yeah, but and the problem is, and I know he's not going to mind me saying this. My brother's homosexual,
Mm, okay.
and a lot of the elders, weren't jive with that, and
Mm,
he ended up
yeah.
leaving that religion. He did it for a little while.
Mm,
And I mean, that was on him. I think he was on a good path when he was doing that.
mm,
But, I can't imagine what his struggle was like, being homosexual and still trying to find God and whatnot,
mhm.
I
Yeah.
can't
Well,
even imagine.
and what years was this back in like the 80s and 90s, or was it recently?
Probably. Yeah, probably. Because he was a teenager.
And back then, it's funny. I talked to my kids about this because my kids grew up in a completely different environment when it came to LGBTQ stuff than I did
Hmm.
in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
So, trying to explain to them the context of things even watching movies in the 80s and 90s and the way they reference, homosexuals and trans people and things of that nature, just explaining to them you have to watch it in the context of the time to understand what it was like. And I got to imagine it was a real rough time being homosexual in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a struggle for him, and a lot of doors were closed in his face because of that. And there was a lot of discrimination back then, a lot.
Yeah.
And there still is, but not like it was then, like you said. It's not like it
Yeah,
was then.
definitely.
Mm.
So now, and I understand that as you were growing older, there was a instance that occurred with your father. Was that your biological father, or the
It was
father you knew?
the father I knew, Danny George. So like I had mentioned previously, he was on drugs. He had a really bad drug problem, and when I was 12, he was just like he was really out of it. One night, one night, we had such a crazy life. I mean, I'm sorry I'm getting stumbled here, but we had such a crazy life. So we've seen so many crazy things growing up with our family, like violent incidences and different things. And I remember one night, it was June in '82, and I was 12 years old, and my dad got a phone call, and my uncle Mike, his brother, had been stabbed in the neck with a tire iron by one of our family friends, no doubt.
Hmm,
And he was in the hospital in emergency surgery.
hmm,
Now, my mom, she was a really big bingo player,
hmm,
and she was playing bingo at the high school that night. And my dad says, "You need to run to that bingo hall. You need to go get your mom and tell her what happened and tell her to come."
hmm,
So I did, and we were walking across this field back towards where we lived in this little duplex. And as we're walking across the field, my mom says, "Hmm." She goes, "I thought you were going to tell me that your dad killed himself." Now, at 12 years old, I mean, I had heard him threaten it before, of course,
hmm, hmm,
but I didn't really think that it was ever going to happen. You know what I mean?
hmm,
And so 3 days later, on Father's Day, He had been out all night the night before, and he came in early in the morning, started a fight with my mom in the bedroom, um, and he pulled the shotgun off the wall and he blew his brains to the ceiling.
Wow.
He threw my mom for, a major loop, threw us all for a loop. We didn't know what to do.
I know when you say you didn't know what to do, you mean like in the moment, or you mean in the
In the,
aftermath?
I mean, in the moment, it was just like, she's like, I was in the living room and I was pushing my little brother, who was only like 5 months old, his baby swing.
Wow.
And they were in the bedroom. And when I heard that noise, which really didn't sound like a gunshot, um, when I heard that noise, the door flung open and my dad's body was laying there.
Oh my gosh.
Now, at 12 years old, I seen this, and my dad's brains were on the ceiling.
Oh, jeez.
And but I can tell you right now, Josh, that I don't remember it.
Wow.
I totally blocked it out of my brain, and
Wow.
I don't remember it. My mom says, "Yeah, I seen it all," but I don't remember seeing it.
Wow.
And we were so poor, we didn't have a telephone, and I had to run across the street to my neighbors. A lady that was like kind of like a second mom to all of us in the neighborhood. Her name was Vera Wright. I went over and I just like busted in her front door, and I said, "We have to call the ambulance. My dad shot himself."
Wow.
And like we didn't even have 911 then, Josh. We had to dial 0 for the
Right.
operator,
Right.
and then they had to get the the hold of the fire department, and so it like took a while for them to get there,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there and I'm standing outside, and they wouldn't let me go back in the house, of course. And I called my grandma, his mom, who lived not that far away, probably about 5 minutes away.
Mm-hmm.
And she showed up and she went in there with him, which she never should have because it traumatized her for life.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and my dad, he was part of the Romanian gypsy culture. So he had a lot of gypsy family members that lived in the neighborhood, a whole bunch of them.
Mm.
And so there was like probably 30, 40 people standing in our front yard while the ambulance and the fire department are in there with my dad.
Mm.
And everybody's talking and it's all loud. And then suddenly my grandma appeared at the back door. And I'm telling you, Josh, to this day, it's the most eerie silence I've ever heard.
Mm.
That whole crowd went silent.
Mm.
And I looked at my grandma and I said, "Grandma," and she said, "He's dead."
Mm.
It changed my life forever.
Yeah, as it would.
I was just about to become a teenager. I really needed my dad.
Yeah.
Even
Wow.
though he was only there part time because he had a lot of issues, but when
Yeah.
he was there, he was there. You know what I mean?
The
He
thing
taught
is,
me how to throw a baseball. He taught me how to shoot a gun.
yeah.
Little things, some things. But
So I obviously never went through anything like that, but I know what it's like to have a dad who kind of in and out a little bit because of some demons. And even though that stuff is going on when you're that age, he's still your dad, despite all the stuff, and you still love him. He's still like kind of a hero to you. So I can imagine what a struggle that was. You mentioned going backwards a little bit. And I really want to ask these questions because I want people who haven't lived your life to understand, because I'm sure there are people who listen and hear you say things kind of almost nonchalantly, like, yeah, there was a lot of violent stuff, and I heard he threatened suicide numerous times, and he had all these drug problems, and they're going, man, how did you live in that? Was it just a situation where you just didn't know any different?
I didn't know any different. I grew up in that lifestyle. Everybody was always, when we were all getting along, the family was getting along, everything was great. but there was always some kind of turmoil, it seemed, you know?
Yeah.
And somebody was always fighting and there was always something going on, you know? And
Hmm.
it had a lot to do with people's personalities and people's addictions and a lot of different, there was a lot of different factors involved, of course,
Yeah.
you know, but it just all blending together and, you know, and not to mention mental health issues, you know, it's just
Yeah.
like, you know, my grandma was like an old Oklahoma and Arkansas lady, and she was like an old Okie lady, and she just she did not she did not pull any punches. Let's just say that
Mm.
she's the nicest woman you ever wanted to meet, but when you got on her bad side, forget it. It
Yeah.
was over. She
Well, and it
would she
was,
would she would knock your lights out.
yeah.
She wouldn't care.
Right. Tell me, your mom, before this incident happened, uh, you mentioned your dad had some demons and had some issues. What about your mom? Was she kind of involved in that too, or was she more trying to be a rock
My mom
against
was
it?
the glue.
Yeah.
My mom was the glue. My mom always worked or tried
Mm,
to work, even though, you know, we lived on food stamps, government commodities, things like that. Um, my mom always tried to work, you
mm,
know, no matter where. I mean, she worked. I remember her working at gas stations. I remember her working at a thrift store. She used to work at the Woolworths downtown on K Street, which is no longer there. But, you know, back in the day, it was the hubbub of K Street Mall.
sure.
My mom used to work at that Woolworths downtown.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. My mom always worked, but see, the problem was, and here is my dad and his jealousy and his issues. My
Mm,
mom would start a job and she would start working, and my dad would get jealous over somebody there working there, or and my mom was innocent. She wasn't doing anything, you know what I mean?
mhm.
But
Right.
my dad was just on drugs and he just thought that, you know, everybody was against him. And so then he would end up making her quit the job, you
Mm,
know?
wow.
Yeah. And so I mean, I watched her go through a lot of different jobs.
Yeah. So tell me now, obviously, you have this huge traumatic event that occurs. You're 12 years old. You've got your brother and your sister younger. How does everything change in that moment?
Well, everything changed because automatically I had to become the man of the house
Yeah. At
at
12.
12 years old.
Yeah.
Um, I had already been doing a lot of stuff because my dad, the last couple of years of my dad's life, he wasn't around a lot. He was always out partying and stuff.
Hmm.
So I used to do a lot of the stuff. I used to change my brothers and sisters' diapers. I used to push Josh, I used to push a laundry basket full of the whole family's clothes at like 11 years old up
Hmm.
to the laundromat and do the whole family's laundry.
Hmm.
You know, I had to become responsible from a very young age.
Hmm.
And then when my dad decided to do what he did, it just it just doubled. You know,
Yeah. Right.
I didn't. You know, I tried to have fun with my friends and whatnot, but I didn't really have a lot of friends because I was always busy. You know.
Right. Right. So as this is going on, obviously a major traumatic event affects you mentally. How does that manifest as you continue to go into your teenage years?
Well, I mean, the thing is, like I said, I didn't have a whole lot of friends for one.
Hmm.
I didn't know how to act in social situations.
Hmm.
I tried going to a school dance in junior high, and I felt so out of place. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
I just couldn't do it. You know, my whole existence was at home. My whole existence at that moment, when I was 13, was rap music and break
Hmm.
dancing. You know, I used to be into
Nice.
that. You
Uh,
know, so me and my cousins, we would get together and we'd put the cardboard down and we'd, you know, spit on our backs and listen to old school rap, you know, that we call old school rap now. It's way old school now, but it wasn't old school then. It was
right.
brand new then. But yeah. And you know, so mainly, I mean, I just hung with family. And like I said, I had a whole bunch of gypsy cousins that lived in my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And we all walked to school together. We all hung out together pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Right. Now, it's interesting because I find for different people, even people in the same family, that when you have someone with mental health issues or someone with drug issues, it causes the people around them to make decisions on their relationships with drugs. And I'm sure, you know, you're going through school in the 80s, right? You're going through your
Yeah, right.
middle and high school. A lot of
Hmm.
drugs around.
Yeah, there was.
How did it affect your relationship with drugs as you were getting into adolescence?
Well, I can see. I can tell you, my relationship with drugs actually goes back to 8 years old.
Hmm.
Okay, and so that man, Danny George, my dad, when I was 8 years old, we were having a party at my house one time,
Mhm.
and all his gypsy cousins were over with their wives and all their kids, whole bunch of them. And in their culture, the women would stay with the women in one room, and the men hang out in another room together.
Mhm.
Um, and those guys were all around this big table in the kitchen, and they were passing, doobies around. And one of them said, "Hey, your son is old enough now to be joining this table. He doesn't need to be in there with the women." And so my dad listened to them and brought me in there and had me sit at the table with the men.
Mhm.
Well, his cousin Matt had this big fat joint and went to go pass it behind my head. And my dad said, "No, let him hit it."
Hmm.
And that was my first hit off of marijuana.
Hmm.
And I laughed my butt off, and they laughed at me because I was laughing and I was so high, and they just thought it was the greatest thing.
Hmm.
Well, from that point on, my dad thought it was okay to get me high.
Hmm.
And then eventually it was my little brother too.
Hmm.
My mom would be out working and my dad would want to go out, and he would take his power hitter and he would give us hits. So we
Hmm.
would go to sleep so he could take off
Hmm.
and leave us there. So
Wow.
my relationship with drugs started way back.
Right.
And so as a teenager, of course I smoked weed.
Hmm.
I drank a lot as a teenager
Hmm.
because my mom didn't even know that I was drinking most of the time,
Hmm.
because my mom had this life where she would go to work all day and then she would go play bingo at night.
Hmm.
And that was her escape.
Hmm.
And she would play bingo probably a lot of times 7 nights a week.
Hmm.
And so my mom didn't know what was going on most of the time, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Well, and were you primarily responsible for the kids, or did you have someone kind of watching you?
Yeah. I mean, we had family members around, you know
Mm,
what I mean? Like I said, there was family members all over, so it
mm,
wasn't a big deal. But,
mm.
I was still able to maintain,
Yeah.
but it was just like, yeah, anytime I could escape.
Yeah. How,
Yeah.
how so the drinking was kind of an escape for you?
Yeah, yeah, and it all started because I was like 13, and one of my friends, we cut school,
Mm,
because I didn't care about school anymore after my dad died. I was very studious, straight A's and B's before that. After
mm,
my dad died, I didn't care anymore. I went
mm.
to junior high and I just was like, I don't want to be here.
Right.
And one of my friends, Angelo, we cut school one time, and he goes, "Hey, I know the liquor store over here. They'll sell us a bottle."
Mm.
And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." So we went and we got a 40 ounce of Old English.
Right.
And we got this 40 ounce of Old English. And when I first went up there with it to the counter, the guy was like, "Can I see some ID?" And I froze. And he goes, "No, I'm just fucking with you." And he
Hmm.
sold me the 40 ounce, even
Wow.
though I was only 13 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And so we went and we went into this fucking big drain pipe by the school, and we split that 40, and we got so messed up, man.
Mm.
And that was just like, I was like, hey, maybe I like alcohol too.
Hmm. Hmm. Did were you able to graduate high school?
Yeah. So what ended up happening was, I ended up dropping out of high school at Grant,
Mm,
and then but my test scores were always so high, and there was this accelerated program that was starting, and they're not around anymore. They were called Educational Clinics Incorporated,
mm,
and they were like, "We want to put you on the fast track to graduation."
mm,
And so I went there for probably about a year and a half,
mhm.
and they ended up getting me my graduation.
Oh,
I
nice.
ended up having enough credits. I started off by passing the GED, which gives you like half your credits,
Yeah.
I passed that with like flying colors.
Mm.
Because like I said, I was intelligent. I didn't have the want to do it anymore, you
Sure.
know?
Sure. Yeah. So as you're graduating high school, I mean, but do you think that the part of the reason why it sounds like what you're saying is part of the reason why you're drinking, you're partying, you have no interest in school is because you're still dealing with the unresolved trauma of your dad's suicide.
Yeah. I was always dealing with it. I had put it to the back of my mind. And so the thing about it is like I was having these dreams all the time, Josh.
Mm.
I had these dreams all the time that my dad faked his death and that he was really alive.
Oh wow.
I would have these dreams on a pretty regular basis.
Mm.
Okay. And I think part of the reason why I had this dream is because my dad's family was Catholic. They wanted him
Mm.
to have an open casket.
Mm.
Now you can imagine what my dad's head wasn't there anymore.
Right.
So they reconstructed my dad
Oh.
with wax.
Mm.
So at 12 years old, happened to walk up to this casket, see
Yeah.
my dad laying there. They had shaved off all his beard, everything. It didn't look like my dad.
Yeah.
I knew it was him, but it didn't look like him.
Mm.
And so for years and years, I had these nightmares. I'd have these dreams that he was alive, and I would be so happy. And then I would wake up the next day and boom.
Mm. Yeah.
The funny thing about that, so I had those dreams for years. And one day, this was after his mother had passed,
Mhm.
I was having another one of those dreams.
Mm.
And suddenly she appeared in the dream.
Mm.
And she was all, Johnny, she goes, your dad's a jokester. And I never had another one after that.
Wow.
So I'm pretty sure my grandma came to me from another realm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And helped me out there
Yeah.
because she loved me so much.
Yeah.
I was
Now,
her first grandchild. So
yeah. So now, religious background. Do you consider yourself a certain religion? I know you're often talking about prayer in social media and in person. Would you consider yourself general Christian? Your dad was Catholic. Do you have a
um,
denomination?
I I consider myself a Christian.
Okay.
I believe in the Savior.
Mhm.
I believe in the Bible.
Mhm.
I actually did a little stint at the Capital School of Ministry, which is no longer around,
Mhm.
and learned a lot more about the Bible than I ever thought I would ever know.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I'm big on prayer because I just believe that prayer works.
Sure.
I've seen it work in so many instances. You know
Sure.
that it's like I have skeptics that'll tell me, "Oh yeah, you go ahead and just close your eyes and think really hard. It's going to work."
Mhm.
Well, with that attitude, it's not going to work, right?
Sure. It's all about faith. You got to believe. Yeah.
You
It's
got to have faith. It says it. That's the first one of the main things it says. The whole Bible is faith.
yeah. Well, the
People
interesting
having faith over and over and over again for centuries and centuries and centuries, despite their circumstances.
well, what's interesting. So there's a there's a scripture in the Bible where Jesus says if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move a mountain.
Right.
And I don't even know if that necessarily has to be faith in God. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I've shared this a number of times on the podcast about the expectation effect. They've done studies that shows that expectation does affect performance. They did it in rats. So they took a bunch of rats and they split them in half.
Mm-hmm.
Half the rats on one side and half the other rats on the other side, and they were going to run them through a maze. And they brought in these test subjects, these volunteers, and they told one half of the volunteers the rats that you're going to be running through this maze were specifically engineered and bred and have been tested to go through this maze. So they should be walking through the maze faster than the other rats.
Mhm.
And they did by about twice the time, even though they were the exact same rats. And so what that tells you is that there's something about your expectation, your faith, that does affect performance in things.
Mhm.
So even if you're not religious, there is a component of faith that is real, you know? And so now tell me, as you're growing older, how old were you? How many kids did you have?
Well, I've got 3 daughters.
Okay.
They're of course they're all grown now. They've all got kids. I got grandkids. They became my daughters at a very young age. They weren't my natural daughters,
Okay.
but they all became my daughters at a very young age, because like I was with my dad. And I've been around for all their kids' births, and what I mean, the whole works.
Okay.
My youngest one, Cara, her and I had a kind of a special bond, but we were alike. We were alike in a lot of ways, and so a lot of times we would butt heads.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I got
Yeah,
daughters, so I know.
yeah. So we would butt heads a lot of times, and it just. But when we got along beautifully.
Yeah.
She was a ruffian. She was into the gang lifestyle. I went through a lot of stuff with her, but no matter what, I never once missed a court date. I would go. I'd visit her at the Sacramento County Jail behind that glass and talk to her, pray with her. There was times when her mother didn't want anything to do with her, and I still went to the courts. I still put money on her books, because I'm gonna tell you, tough love. A lot of people, they believe in the tough love thing, and I'll tell you, tough love is good. It's great, I guess, to a degree. Okay, but you still have to be there for your children no matter what.
Sure.
Because you never know what's going to happen from one day to the next.
Sure.
Now, I watched my daughter get back on her feet several times and start doing good again. Okay. But then something would happen and she'd be back, to doing bad stuff again,
Sure.
And it all depended on the situation or who she was dating at the time or whatever,
Yeah.
There was a lot of factors there for her life too.
Sure.
But when she's an adult, I really couldn't do too much about it except, like I said, go to her court dates and stuff,
Right. As you're real quick going back, this daughter, you said Cara, right? So, and this is the daughter who passed away.
Yes.
Okay. So at what age did you come into Cara's life? How old
she was a teenager.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was she already kind of getting into that?
She had already been getting in trouble. Yeah.
But you had a special bond with her.
Yeah, we did. I mean, I kind of have a special bond with all 3 of them. We all have our own bond, for different reasons. I mean, I could tell you more in a minute about my other daughter, Amber, and why we have a bond. But with Cara, it's just like, I don't know, because I was always kind of gangster, you know what I mean? And she was kind of gangster. So, you know what I mean? We kind of clicked on that level a little bit, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
But,
yeah, that's funny. It's always funny when, as a father, I used to get in a little bit of trouble when I was a kid. So my kids, they get in trouble, and of course I got to come down on them. But secretly in my soul, I'm just sitting there. Like, I remember one time my daughters both got in trouble for something they knew they shouldn't do.
Right.
And I got on both of them. And then as I away from there, I was just like, I'm just grateful that they're coming together and colluding. I am the enemy after all. I am the parent. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
right.
Like, hey, at least you, because they kind of fight themselves. I'm like, the fact that they're colluding together tells me that they've got a bond there. That's great.
Yeah, right,
You know?
right. Yeah, definitely.
I told my oldest son he got in trouble for something. He snuck out of the house once, and I caught him, and he was all upset. And I was like, "Here's the deal, dude. You're gonna take your licks, but understand, I expected this to happen at some point,
Right,
right? You
right,
know what I mean?
right.
Like,
Hmm.
so I understand that now. As you're going through with Kara, um, you're seeing her at the time of her passing. Was she kind of on the uphill, or was she kind of on the downhill? Was she starting to clean her life up? Where was she?
She was actually she was on the downslope again when she passed. I mean, she had a full-time job,
Hmm.
but my daughter was addicted to meth.
Oh, okay.
And it's every waking moment besides her working,
Hmm.
she was gone and she was doing things.
Was she living with you at the time, or was she living
Yeah, she
somewhere
was. She was. She had a bedroom at the house that I was at, and she had a bed. She had her own bedroom, and we struggled I struggled with her about paying rent,
else?
and little things like that. We would fight about that.
Yeah.
We would fight about, because I had house rules, even as an adult.
Yeah.
You're living in my house. I got house rules, and I want you to bring a bunch of dudes over. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And she would break the rules all the time
Hmm.
and not care, you know.
Right. Hmm.
And we'd fight about that. But
Yeah.
beyond that, we got along.
Hmm. So, was there a specific gang that she was involved in, or was it just kind of living a gangster life in general?
You know what? I can't really say it. I can't really say that.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, as she was going through this stuff, what you said it was 1,700 and how many days now?
42.
Okay, so that would translate to math wise. I mean, this is what, 5 years ago? A little over 5 years
Almost.
ago?
July will be 5 years.
Wow. So at the time that of her passing, sometimes I know people who are addicted to meth and kind of in a party lifestyle, they tend to disappear for days at a time.
Hmm. Right.
So at this time when this was going on, had she disappeared for a while? How long was it before you kind
No,
of
she was coming and going all the time.
okay?
In fact, she was the night before she died, or that night. She probably died that night, but she was at my house. I was cooking dinner,
Mhm,
and she come walking in the kitchen behind me to get in the refrigerator or something, and we accidentally bumped into each other, and
mhm,
we were just like, "Oh, hey," and she was like, "Hey," and her and I were just starting to talk again at that moment. You know what I mean? But we
mhm,
were being cordial to each other, and then she went and she got ready to go do what she was going to go do and take off.
mhm,
So she left that night, and I ended up going to bed. I guess she came back later on that night and then left again around 11 o'clock that night,
mhm,
something like that. Yeah.
mhm,
And so the next morning, it was like we're watching the morning news, and I'm a news junkie. I watch the news all the time,
mhm,
and we were watching the news, and there was a car on fire by the river in Rancho Cordova. And I
mhm.
was like, oh wow, first thing I thought is somebody is insurance, they burnt their car up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so then later on, they updated the story and said, well, now we're updated. There's a body in the car.
Mhm,
Well, when they said that, I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach.
mhm,
And at that moment, I didn't know what it was.
mhm,
And it wasn't until later on when the detectives let us know that it was my daughter's car.
mhm,
And it's affected our family in so many ways. and it's caused so much turmoil. And it's
Mm.
caused some people to come together, but it's caused some people to go, break apart. And it's been crazy,
Yeah. Can I back you up a little bit and ask
Mm-hmm.
you some questions? So, you see this thing on the news, you get this
Mm-hmm.
pit in your stomach. How did you officially find out? Did police come to your door?
Yeah, they came, and so her son was there at the house with us,
Mm.
and he's already a grown, and
Mhm.
because she had him when she was a teenager, and
Mm.
they wanted him to come in to talk to them, and they
Mm.
told him, and then
Mhm.
he came back to deliver the news.
Mm. Wow. How old was he at the time?
Um, Early 20s,
Oh, okay. All right. And she
mm-hmm.
was how old when she passed?
In her 30s.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, um, when the doorbell rang or they knocked on the door, did you kind of have a sense of what the issue was?
Well, see, I wasn't there when they came.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and so then later on when I came, then I found out he came back and said that they had come and he went down there with them, and then they told him it was his mom's car.
Mm. Wow. And then you link up with him a little after that?
Huh?
Did you
Yeah,
link up with him a little after that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
how when you found out about it, tell me like what was the general reaction? Obviously not good, but I mean, were you kind of disassociating? Were you crying? Were you mad? What was going on?
I was shocked. It was shock.
Uh-huh.
It was shock. I couldn't believe that this was happening, but at the same time, how you were talking about, just earlier, sometimes you expect things. I never expected it,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
But I always knew that it was a possibility that something bad could happen, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I seen this girl, Josh. I seen her go through jail so many times. I watched her graduate to prison. I
Mhm.
watched her graduate to fire camp. And then I
Mhm.
watched her go to this program called the Delancey Street program in San Francisco.
Mhm.
And she did 2 whole years in that program and she completed that program. And she was doing really well when she got out. Really well.
What is that program for?
Um, you know, I honestly can't tell you. It's supposed to be some kind of restructuring program and trying to get you back on your feet for prisoners.
Mm.
It's an option besides going back to prison. And they're really strict there, and we couldn't even talk to her. Nobody could talk to her for the whole 2 years. And you
Is
work
this
in their you
is
work in their kitchen and
oh,
just
okay.
yeah, and I don't know what all they do there. I really don't. But
The time she went to prison, were these like drug related offenses? Was she having issues with drugs or
violence,
okay. All
yeah,
right.
violent acts, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. All right. So, and we're and I understand you probably don't feel comfortable naming names or things of that nature, but were a lot of these involved with gang related activity? Were there enhancements because of that?
Not really. They never could really pin her down to like any set or anything like that.
Okay.
And she always just, I mean, let's just say she wrote her beefs, you know what I mean? And she wrote them solo.
Mm,
Nobody ever went down with her, you know.
mm, mhm,
He was a
mhm,
true soldier in that aspect.
I see. Yeah, definitely not a snitch.
Definitely not at all.
Right.
No.
So you find out about this and it happens. Tell me in the aftermath. First of all, you know uh did you who ended up having to identify the body?
Well, that's just it. So there was no identification of the body. It was we had to do DNA, and they
Oh,
took
sure.
DNA from her son. And the thing about it is like she never came back home.
Hmm.
So my first, I mean, you come up with the craziest thoughts, and being that my daughter was in that lifestyle and that she had been involved in violent things before,
Hmm.
you know, my thought at one second was maybe that wasn't her in her car. Maybe
Hmm.
it was somebody else in her car. Maybe my
Hmm.
daughter's out there somewhere still, right?
Oh, like maybe she had put someone in her car type of thing and was on the run?
Who knows? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
I don't know. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Yeah.
But
Can I actually
as the days went on, you know.
yeah, before we go farther into kind of the aftermath of that, let me back up a little bit and ask you a question because you know
Mm-hmm.
you're a father, you know, and I gotta say it's one thing to be a you know biological father. It's another thing to take somebody else's kids at that time who are already struggling and become a father. That's very commendable of you to do that and ride that through, even though I take it that you and their mother no longer together. Fair?
We won't talk. We won't
Sure.
talk about that.
Yeah, sure. But like as far as that goes, there's something to you, there's something about you that's commendable that you're willing to do that, especially with kids who are, you know, troubled in that kind of lifestyle. So tell me what the psyche is of somebody, because there are a lot of people out there who talk about boundaries and
Mm-hmm.
people who have never dealt with you know someone who's a drug addict or someone who's violent or someone who has mental health issues or someone who is in and out of prisons. It's very easy for someone who hasn't dealt with that to say, well, I wouldn't allow that, I would do this or that. What would you say would be a recommendation as someone who has parented and you know and been in that lifestyle and parented in that lifestyle about how you properly you know parent someone in that you know in that mind frame, I guess.
Well, I mean, you sometimes, I mean, there's really nothing that you can do, you know, because you know, teenagers are going to be teenagers, kids are going to be kids, right?
Right.
Even as adults, you know, when they're making this, you know, they're making poor choices, we can't do nothing about that. You
Hmm.
know, it's just, you know, we could just try to be there for them. You know what I mean? Like I said, I was at every court date. You know, I visited her in jail so many different times. You know what I mean? Even though I didn't want her to be there, you know.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
gonna tell you, some of those court dates at the county jail. I
Hmm.
mean, let me tell you, I would sit there in like Department 62 or whatever
Sure.
for hours on end,
Hmm.
waiting for her to come out.
Hmm.
And a lot of times they would bring the females out like towards the end of the day.
Hmm.
And it would be just, I would see all these cases going on all day long. And
Hmm.
then just, and I would sit there and wait and wait and wait. And then I would get to see my daughter for maybe 2 minutes,
Hmm.
but I got to see her.
Sure.
And it meant the world to me at the time. And it meant the world to her to come out in that cage and look across and see that I was there.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the aftermath of what's going on, tell me about what if any investigation was done and what the kind of mindset of the police was as they were investigating it.
Well, you know, I believe you know, just my personal opinion, I believe the original deputy that was investigating the case, because he knew her didn't have her best interests at heart.
Hmm. Oh, he had knew her previously.
Yes.
Okay.
But since then, it's changed over a couple of times. But I just want to see the current detective that's on it. She's really on it. She's really on it.
Hmm.
And I've been told that I can't really say too much about the case,
Hmm.
you know, except that they're working leads.
Hmm.
They're working leads. The problem is, you know, and it's with society, you know, it's like I told you, my daughter wasn't a snitch, right?
Right.
Well, none of the people that she really ran with or are on those streets is a snitch either, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of people out there that know what's going on, Josh. They know what has happened to her. They know who did it. They know why, but they just won't speak,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know? And
Hmm.
so, you know, one of the things that I tried to do recently, probably within the last 6 months, is because being so tired of it, you know, it was suggested that, you know, I start a reward fund.
Hmm.
You okay? And so I started, you know, I didn't want to do GoFundMe because they take a lot of money. So
Sure.
I started this thing called a spot fund, and I
Hmm.
called it Justice for Supergirl because she was named after Supergirl.
Hmm.
And I called it Justice for Supergirl. You know, and like only a few people donated. It got to like $200, and then it just stopped.
Hmm.
You know, and I kind of got a little discouraged about it
Hmm.
because you know they say loose lips sink ships, right?
Sure.
And a little bit of money just might make somebody talk, you
Sure.
know?
Right.
And so I thought, I can do this because I see people donating to GoFundMe's for some of the craziest shit sometimes. You
Sure.
know, I see people that say my car's broke down, help me out. And then 20 people will donate and they get their car fixed. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I'm trying to do something to give my family some freaking peace, man, and some justice for my daughter,
Sure.
and it's like, it just didn't go anywhere, A few of my wrestler friends donated,
Mm-hmm.
and it was cool, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? But then it just stopped. And I believe it's still active. You know what I mean? I haven't cashed anything out of it or anything like that, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But I
Well,
was trying. I mean, I had set the goal for 10,000, but
mm-hmm.
I would have been happy with 5 because I've heard of several. Or there's a couple of different organizations that will match
Mm.
money. So I
Well,
was like, okay, if I can get it to 5, you know what I mean?
sure. Well, we'll do me a favor. Send me the link so when this pops up, we'll put it in the comments or in the
Okay,
description so people can donate if they want to.
right.
What one thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned earlier that it brought some people together and it tore some people apart. So tell me, in the aftermath of this, um, how it affected your family members and how it affected you.
Well, it's like, so my one daughter, she's the investigator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My daughter Amber, she's the middle one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and she's the investigator. And she stays connected with. She moved back to Iowa some years ago, but she's still connected to a lot of the people here. And so she gets, all these rumors, as well as my daughter's mom. They get these
Mm-hmm.
rumors from people off the streets
Mm-hmm.
about different names, who could have done it, this, that. But the problem is there's so many rumors you can't really sort them all out.
Sure. Sure.
And it's just best just to just let the police do their investigation, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But sometimes my daughter, she'll hear something from somebody and then she's calling and then she gets us all riled up. You know what I mean? Because now there's a new lead, but is it really a lead or is it somebody just trying to hokey doke us? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't know, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I want is for somebody to get arrested or something that didn't do it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Sure.
So, yeah.
Do you have at all, perhaps you can talk about it if you can. Do you have any idea at all about where she was, the steps she took before she was killed?
No, I don't. I don't. I know that I just know that where her car ended up, and that was at the Almanto Pass by the river. You know.
So nobody in the investigation has pieced together kind of where
Well,
she was
so
or what she was
so
going.
the last place that she was seen was at a car wash on McGregor Drive near Coloma
Mhm.
Road.
Mhm.
That's the last place she was actually seen. Beyond that, we don't know.
Do they know
We've actually
when?
had a couple of candlelight vigils at that car wash.
Interesting. So, do you know about what time the murder took place and where she was? You don't know any of that.
I don't. All I know is that at about like 5 something in the morning, the car was on fire at the
Wow.
river.
Wow.
So I have no idea.
Did they
Sometime
do
in the
it?
middle of the night, she was murdered somewhere else and then driven to the river.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like what happened is that did she die of like a gunshot wound or do they know how she died before that?
We have no idea.
Really? Wow. Because of the
No,
burn
and
because the body was burned.
her body was burnt so bad that it was pretty much like I said. They had to do DNA, and they could barely get any DNA from it, from her
Mhm.
remains, and they had to compare it to her son's. And we watch these programs, these CSI programs and stuff, and they put it in a database, and it comes right back. But in reality, it doesn't work that way. It took a few months.
Mm.
So we
Mhm.
had to sit there for a few months before we could even plan our daughter's funeral. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm. Man.
Yeah.
So as far as the investigation, I know you can't talk much about it, but do they have any theories of why it happened?
No.
Nothing.
Mm-mm.
Wow. That's got to be that's got to be even harder not knowing.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm sure there's theories,
Mhm,
okay, but the
mhm.
detectives can't tell me any of them.
Oh, okay.
Um, they showed me two tall stacks of files on their desk. That's all my daughter's case.
Mhm,
I mean, two tall stacks.
mhm,
They have done so much work on it in the last 4.5 years. But like I said, they just can't get anybody to talk.
mhm,
They've
mhm,
got the leads. They just need someone to speak up.
mhm. Is there a seriously strong gang community in Sacramento?
There is. There is, you know what I mean? And it's like we don't I mean, the people that didn't grow up in the lifestyle or don't really know about the lifestyle, they
Mhm,
don't know how many gangs there really are in Sacramento. There are
mhm,
so many
mhm,
different sets. It's like people could watch like an old movie like Colors, and yeah, it's the Bloods and the Crips. It's way beyond that.
mhm,
There are so many subsets of gangs out there that it's ridiculous. You
mhm.
know, Case in point, you got these gang members sitting that just went to court again yesterday for a shooting that happened in K Street Mall 2 years ago,
Mm,
and they're
mm.
just now getting to their preliminaries 2 years later.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Well,
but they're
COVID
all part
really.
of a big culture of gangs, and it was a gang fight that caused that shooting. It was two different sets of gangs that seen each other at a club and started firing at each other.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, also COVID, we're still in the court system working through COVID, the backlog
Hmm.
from COVID. I mean, even
Right.
3 years, 4 years later, we're still
Hmm.
struggling.
Hmm.
I tell my clients all the time, if you get in a car accident today and I file a complaint tomorrow, you're not seeing a courtroom for 2 years. You know,
Yeah.
it just, it's that clogged.
Hmm.
So, so now you mentioned also, you don't know much about the case itself as far as theories or what happened. Talk to me about, I mean, obviously you've had a lot of trauma considering what was going on with your dad, and I'm sure there's a lot of trauma that we haven't even talked about yet. Other than that, too, tell me in that context how this news has affected you personally.
Personally, um, it's affected me in ways that it opened up some addictions. You know what I mean? Not
Mm,
nothing. I'm not like out doing drugs, something like that. But had started drinking again. Because I couldn't go to sleep without thinking about her or
mm,
thinking about her case.
mhm, mhm.
And so it's just like the best thing for me to do, it seemed, was just to, let's have a drink at night.
Try to bury it. Sure.
Yeah, and it's not, I never not like drinking all damn day and getting sloshed and slurring my words and, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm having a drink, relaxing, being able to go to sleep.
Yeah.
The problem is, and here's the problem, the same dreams that I used to have about my dad being still alive, I now have about my daughter.
Mm,
I have these dreams pretty frequently. She's there, we're having a good time, we're whatever. You know what I mean?
mhm,
I had a dream the other night that her and I were hanging out and we were smoking some weed. You know
mm.
what I mean? Just
Yeah.
out of the blue. I don't know why. I just had this dream that her and I were sitting and we were smoking some weed, we were laughing, and we were telling jokes, and then I wake up and it's like, oh shit, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
Yeah. You mentioned that it's opened up, it's torn some people apart. What is it about this that tore parts of your family apart?
Well, because I mean, for the most part, a lot of people came together, but you know what I mean? A lot of people, I'm sure have differences of opinion about how to go about the case and stuff. And
Mm,
like I said, my daughter, she's an investigator. I'm more of a let the police do their job.
mhm,
But when I hear things, sometimes my mind wants to run with them too. You know.
mhm.
So
Is there an element of some people in your family thinking, well, I mean, she was in the lifestyle, so that's what you expect versus other people, is it kind of like that? Is that kind of part of the issue, or is it just people processing it different ways?
Just people processing it in different ways, and it's her older sister and her were pretty close,
Mhm.
but she's got her own lifestyle going on. She's remarried. She's got a new stepdaughter, the one that she's had for the last 4 or 5 years. That's
Mhm.
my granddaughter, and she stays busy in that lifestyle and being a wife to her husband. And
Mhm.
I know she misses her. I know she misses her sister, but when her and I talk about it, it's hard for her to even talk about it.
Sure.
She doesn't even, really. I don't think it's because she doesn't. I don't think it's because she doesn't have any feelings,
Sure.
but it's really hard for her to express them.
Yeah. Have you done any sort of therapy to kind of address some of these issues?
Yeah, I've been doing support group. You know, um, Her mother and I, we both attend the support group over at the DA's office for
Mm.
parents of murdered children, and they help out a lot.
Mm.
We just recently did an event at Howell Park last week
Mm.
where they planted a tree in honor of murder victims,
Mm.
and we got to paint a rock.
Mm.
So I painted a rock with my daughter's name and all that on it, and it got to be placed around this tree. So now every once in a while, I can go back to that park and I can see my daughter's rock.
Yeah.
And I can watch that tree grow.
Mm. So, you know, as you now, I'll tell you, there's probably some people who are listening to this, and I know this actually because I did a small stint at a DA's office, not here in Sacramento, but in a
Mm-hmm.
different county. And one of the things that I found so interesting, and part of the reason why I didn't become a prosecutor, was because of how desensitized the people who worked in that were. And what I mean by that is there was kind of a view that a lot of murders would occur. It would be like what they would call "quote unquote" bad people hurting other bad people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned earlier that the original investigator on the case knew her, and so he didn't really have her best interest in heart. Did you feel like there was a
Right.
little bit of that going on in the
I
situation?
personally, yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, the case had gotten moved to another guy. And the other detective that was working on it after him was really good, but
Mm-hmm.
he was really logged down with
Mm.
cases.
Yeah, a lot of
You,
cases.
you can tell you see how many murders happen in Sacramento all the time now. And it's just like every time there's another murder, I go, my first thought is, okay, somebody lost a child now. That's my first thought.
Mm-hmm.
But then my second thought is, oh, wow, that's going to put my daughter's case in the back burner. And I know
Mm-hmm.
it's selfish to think that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm like, I want
You're not,
justice,
yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah,
I want
yeah,
justice.
yeah. So, what would be your message if there's somebody listening to this and they're saying and they're hearing about your daughter? And I'm not trying to trigger you. I'm just telling you there's probably somebody out there who's thinking this. Well, your daughter was a multiple time, you know, prison felon, whatever. Probably got mixed up in some bad stuff and suffered the consequences. Uh, what would you say to that person who kind of has that view of your daughter's death?
I would tell them this, Josh. It's the same thing as this. I'm walking down the street earlier.
Mhm.
There's a guy in the middle of the street talking to whoever,
Mhm.
flailing his arms around, almost getting hit by a car. And there were people out there that were like, and kind of laughing and making fun of this guy. That's somebody's child.
Mhm.
That man out there in that street, despite his circumstances, is somebody's child. And you don't know his story. You know, despite anything your kids do, whether it's bad, good, indifferent, things you don't agree with, you still have to love your children.
100%.
You may be really angry with them sometimes, you know, but you still have to leave that door open for your kid to be there whenever they need to be there.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, when they become adults, you know, and then they make their own choices, they live their own lives. Okay, yeah, you can disagree with it, but there's not much you can do about it, right? You know, like I said, my best way to be there for my daughter was to show up at our court dates. It was the only way I knew. Throw a little money on her books when she needed it. Visit her, look at her throughout the glass and talk to her. You know what I mean? Sometimes she would have me do her bidding for her. She'd be like, hey, can you call this person? You know what I mean? I'd be like, yeah. You know what I mean? Let her know where she's at, you know? But I did it all because I loved her, you know?
Right.
You know, even though I was upset and I didn't, you know, I didn't like some of the reasons that she was in jail, but I still loved her and I still had to be there for her regardless.
So I can't imagine what living like this, waking up and knowing the day, how many days it's been. It's got to be hard for you. Tell me what you're feeling on a daily basis when you think about this incident that occurred, and what do you hope to happen?
My hope every day is just to get through the day. You know, it's not that I'm not going to think about it, because I'm going to think about it every day. I'm going to think about her case every day. There's nothing I can do to stop that. What I do, and you know this personally already, is I stay connected to pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do that is because when I'm putting over a show, or I'm Johnny freaking George, the dope MC, or I'm the Sultan, or whatever, I'm not me anymore. I get to escape. I get to be somebody else. I get to take the gimmick and just become the gimmick. You know what I mean? And for that little brief time, whether it's a few hours at a TWF show, whether it's 10 minutes in a match outside at Next Level, for that brief time, I don't have to think about it anymore. You know, and it's people like Justin Caton and Jake Sherman that know this, and they keep me busy. You know, and I appreciate those two so much, you know, because they keep me plugged in. You know, with the Sultan character, you know, it's a creation of the Sultan character came about. It's funny. The Sultan character came about because when Justin first had this idea for a wrestling company, he told me about it. We were on our way back from TWF in Manteca. And Justin told me, I got this idea for a wrestling company. And we were both big fans of the Sportatorium days, World Class Championship Wrestling.
Sure.
He goes, I kind of want to pattern it after that. I want to have my own little Sportatorium. But we have the WrestlePlex now. You know what I mean? It's not as big as a Sportatorium, but you know what I mean? We kind of do now.
Yeah.
But when he told me his vision about this company, and he told me he wanted to give me an opportunity to be a manager, I said, okay, let's do it, you know?
Yeah.
And so from the very first day, from the ground floor, I've been involved with this company, right? And so for a minute, we didn't know what my manager gimmick was going to be, but we were both fans of Akbar Skandar. And so I was going to be like the Akbar Skandar of Next Level.
Nice.
So that's basically what the Sultan was patterned after.
Nice.
Yeah. And so originally, when I first started the gimmick, I took some flack. You know, a couple of people that I've been connected with in wrestling for years like two of them
Mm-hmm.
messaged me and said, "Hey, cuzzy, I don't know about this gimmick." You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And I was like, "Okay, but just give me a minute to work on it and tweak it out."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, now some of those guys I've been involved in matches with several times. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sure.
So obviously we're good, right?
Right. Right.
Right. And but originally when I came up with that, when we were Justin gives me the freedom to come up with ideas, to tweak it out.
Mm-hmm.
I always run everything past him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he gives me full creativity with this gimmick. And so, like one of my first things was I didn't want to be a sheik. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, because there's already, you know what I mean? I don't want to identify.
Sure.
I don't want to be a terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be one of those guys that's anti-USA because I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want it to be kind of tongue in cheek, but at the same time patterned after Skandar, right?
Sure.
And so one of the first shows we ran, um, I come out and I got this hijab, and it was a different one than I wear now. And I had the whole Muslim robe and everything, which I don't wear anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I come out and there was live commentary going on. And I didn't have any glasses to wear. So I put on like my Loke sunglasses, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the commentator, who I think was Matt Freeman's cousin, said, he goes, "Hey, look, it's a Cholo Arabian." And so I ran with that. The very next day, I cut a promo on this guy. And I told him how he was racist because he was making fun of my Mexican Arabian heritage. And it blew up.
Nice.
Yeah. Just something that simple. You know what I mean? You never know how things are going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But
Can I ask you a question? You mentioned that you love getting involved in wrestling because it allows you to not be you for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about you that you think you need to escape?
I need to escape. Well, for one, my grief.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done any one-on-one grief counseling yet.
Mm-hmm.
I want to. I'm just not ready.
Yeah.
So my counseling, my therapy has been wrestling.
Yeah.
That's what it's been.
Mm-hmm. Is that the only thing?
Huh?
Is that the only thing you need to escape?
For the most part right now, yeah. I mean, I have a pretty decent life, I mean, my bills are broke, but my bills are paid,
Sure.
I work for a great basketball organization, the greatest basketball organization in the world, Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
I have a history that goes back to them from being from 15 years old,
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a story all in itself,
Yeah. Yeah. We'll definitely have to talk about that. We'll have you back on to talk about that. I want to kind of focus on this. Reason I bring it up is because I feel a little bit of the same thing. I don't need to be a pro wrestler. I have a very full life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is I got so many things going on and so many irons in the fire and really so much trauma that I don't talk about, publicly about stuff going on. There's some things that just need to stay private,
Right.
But it's nice to be able to go out there for, I wouldn't even say 15 minutes. I think the whole process of showing up at the building, seeing your friends you don't get to see, being able to figure out, hear what you're doing, cut a promo, get dressed, watch the matches, have your match, do all of those things. It allows you to kind of escape a little bit, be a different character, and just not feel the pressures of everyday life, of all of the responsibilities, all the grief, all the anger, all the fatigue from just living the life. So that's why I ask. It's just interesting to hear someone else say it's an escape.
Well, it's like I love being a manager. I really like being in the ring and doing the ring announcer thing. I like being able to get the crowd going and putting things over and putting over my friends in the ring. You know what I mean? I really like doing all that stuff. But I got to say, man, that I almost quit it, at one
Mm,
point,
yeah.
because, well, for one thing, I'm walking around right now. I have a tumor on my spine,
Oh, wow.
and
Yeah.
it's up near the L2, L3 area of my spine,
Sure.
and so it's like I'm not really supposed to be like what we call bumping in wrestling.
Sure.
But as a manager, sometimes I take bumps still.
Yeah.
I've taken the big boot from Alex Ace. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And just
Yeah.
different things. I've been choked out. I've been speared. All these different things, right? But the thing is I only work with people that I know are going to keep me safe. You know what I mean?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. And so as long as I do things right and I do things the way that I'm taught, I'm
Mhm.
going to be okay. You
Yeah.
know,
Sure.
I almost quit because I was working with a great man named Virgil Flynn,
Mhm.
and he passed away on us suddenly one day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Remember
it
that. I
threw
remember
me and probably the whole wrestling community for a loop
it did.
because nobody expected it. I was talking to him one day. I talked to him one day, and I didn't talk to him for a couple days, and he passed.
Mhm.
And it's funny. So here's something I would like to say about that I think is kind of important. And this
Mhm.
is for a lot of the people that I know in wrestling. Sometimes when we see our friends in the locker room, someone will say, "Hey, let's take a selfie," right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'll go and we'll go, "Yeah, yeah." And then some people will be joking about it, say, "Oh, you guys are just all marks and da 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 da," right?
Mhm.
Well, let me tell you something. I never took a picture with Virgil Flynn, but
Mhm.
4 days before he died, we had run this student show, right? And
Mhm.
he was refereeing that night because we didn't have nobody to ref that night.
Sure.
And
Uh-huh.
so he was refereeing that night. It was just a student show anyway. And he
Mhm.
was just coming back from injury. He had been injured. And so
Mhm.
he ref that night. And so I went up to Virgil and I said, "Hey, Virgil," I said, "let me take a selfie with the new ref." And so him
Mhm.
and I took a picture together. We took two pictures, right?
Mhm.
Well, 4 days later, he died.
Yeah.
Had I never taken that picture, I wouldn't have that memory with him right now, and that
Yeah.
I get to see all the time. It's my background on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, and so now I'm like, a lot of times I'll be like, "Hey, man, let's take a picture." You know what I mean? "Hey,
Yeah.
let's take a
Yeah.
picture. Hey,
Yeah.
let's take a picture." Because you know what? You never know.
Yeah. You
You
never
never,
do,
you
man.
never know.
Well, so what what is the hope moving forward? I know you're hoping for, I'm assuming you're hoping for someone to be brought to justice. Do you feel like that would kind of help your grief?
Well, yeah, and so and here's the thing. So I know from my support group that even when somebody is arrested, it's just going to be the beginning of my trauma.
Mhm. Mhm.
The trial itself is going to be traumatic.
Sure.
DA has already been talking to me and her mother about things that we to expect in the trial.
Mhm.
There might be people in there that are laughing about my daughter's death. There might be people in there that are talking bad about my daughter.
Mhm.
They're going to show pictures
Mhm.
on the screen, probably of my daughter's body.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different things that are going to be happening. It's just the beginning, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the DA's office, they're doing a really good job with. We have a liaison there, and they're doing a really good job of preparing us for that.
Mhm.
Because I honestly believe justice is coming soon.
Mhm.
Honestly, do. But I just,
Is it
they just need. I think we just need somebody to talk.
is
You
that
know,
is that a hunch or is that based on something you've heard?
it's just a feeling I'm getting. You
Mm.
know, it's
Mhm.
just a feeling I'm getting. I just, I think just the one key is just to get somebody to talk.
Yeah.
And if it takes somebody to get in trouble and they want to get themselves out of trouble, so they start ratting somebody out, or whether it takes a reward money to get somebody to talk, whatever it takes, you just need somebody to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Johnny, we're going to have you back on so we can actually talk some light stuff like wrestling and the Sacramento Kings. This
Yeah,
is a pretty heavy topic, but I
yeah,
want to keep it on this because I know that this is something that's important to you. And I
Mm-hmm.
know also that you've mentioned that some people have said you talk about it too much. I have never felt that way. I feel like, I have a very different view of Facebook than a lot of people do. Sometimes they think people who post this stuff are looking for attention or all these things, and that's true. But that may be true for some people. For me, I look at Facebook as kind of like my online journal that other people can view and what I hope to portray out in the world. I don't know how many times I look at my Facebook memories and watch all the pictures of my kids and doing
Right.
breakfasts or
Mm-hmm.
fun wrestling memories of doing cool wrestling stuff or
Mm-hmm.
just really awesome things that I forget about, old pictures of my kids when they were little. It's I that's why I takes like when I go on trips with my kids or whatever, I take so many pictures and I post them because
Right.
I don't have photo albums really. That
Mm-hmm.
is
Right.
my
Right.
photo album. You know
That
what I
is it.
mean?
Yeah, that is it. Yeah, that's what it
And
is. Yeah,
and
exactly. Well, yeah,
uh,
so for me, so the reason why I post a lot about it too, besides the fact that it's therapy for me,
mhm,
um, I post about it a lot because, well, like I have over 800 friends on Facebook. Okay,
yeah. Mhm.
you never know who's reading the post.
Mhm.
Somebody may read a post about my daughter that's never read one before.
Mm.
You know what I mean? A
Mhm.
friend of a friend of a friend. Who
Sure.
knows? You
Mhm.
know what I mean? I go on there, I'll post about my daughter, I'll make it public. Who knows who's going to see it?
Sure.
Anybody could see it at any time,
Yeah.
and that one person that sees it, it could lead to this, to that. Who knows?
Sure.
You know, but it's like I actually had a wrestler one time that I worked with tell me that they unfriended me on Facebook because they thought I posted too much about my daughter.
Wow.
And I'm not going to bother, I'm not going to see who the wrestler is, of course, because I don't work with them anymore. I can tell you
Mhm.
that. You know what
Sure.
I mean? They're not in the
Sure.
business anymore. But I was just like, wow, really, dude? It was
Yeah.
somebody that I thought was pretty cool too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, okay, you know.
Yeah.
hmm And
Well,
that's how
sorry
you
to
really know. And that's how you really know who your friends are. I've made I've made such good friends, in pro wrestling, man. People that
mhm.
like got my back, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody involved with Birds of Fun Productions, man. The Joe DeSoul and Hayashi and the trainers there. You know what I mean? And Super Beast, and you know what I mean. I've
Mhm.
made so many connections. You know what I mean. Mike
Mhm.
Rain is a really good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he's one of those dudes that I could if I'm going I can message Mike about anything,
Yeah.
and he's going to be right there to talk to me about it. You know
Mike
what I
is such
mean?
a good dude. Has
Yeah,
been forever.
he's an awesome dude, man. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He's one of the people that Virgil told me years ago. He goes, all the people in wrestling, he says, you can always trust Mike.
Yeah.
That meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
It meant a lot to me.
Mike is an I'll tell you a quick story about Mike that a lot of people don't know. Back in 2002, 2003,
hmm
I started I did SWF. It really became a big thing in 2009. From
hmm
2009 to 2013, I ran it and we had a lot of big success. But before that, I tried to launch it when I was 21 years old. It was 2003.
hmm
He was 22. And I did a couple of shows. Well, I did one show and then I ended up canceling a show. And I was getting a lot of flack because back then in the message boards, it was just a different time. People weren't collaborating. They weren't nice to each other. Every promotion was
Right,
trying to
right.
get another show canceled.
hmm
And I was taking a lot of flack. And Mike Rain, who didn't really know me other than me calling him and saying, "Hey, I'd like to book you on a show," really came to my aid. And he didn't need to do that,
hmm
And it was then that I said, "Hey, like that's a guy who I can trust," and I've loved him ever since. And same thing, message him all the time.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't know how he eats like that and maintains that physique. I think that's a there's a yeah there's some sort
I,
of rib
I,
going on there. There's no
I'm
way.
still wait. I'm still waiting to be invited to one of his barbecues. So if you're listening
Yeah,
to Mike, no.
yeah, I know, right? I look at all this stuff he's eating, and I'm like, there's got to be a rib there somewhere. There's no way he's eating all that stuff and maintaining that jacked physique.
Right,
So,
right.
but anyhow, well, Johnny, I appreciate you coming on here. Tell me, uh, for people, what's the best way for people who hear this to support you?
Honestly, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't want to say it because, I feel like I'm begging for money or whatever. But if you got $10, if you've got $20 and you can get to the spot fund, it's Justice for Supergirl, and you could donate and I can get up a certain amount of money to put in a reward fund. I'm not saying it's gonna, make loose lips, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it might.
Yeah.
It might,
Well, make sure to get me the link so I can put it in the
I will.
description. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And so, well, we're going to have you back on again because I'll talk to you about other parts of your life and we'll talk about all these other things and I'll ask you my famous 3 questions. I'm not going to do that here because right now I wanted to focus on this. But for those of you who are listening to this, look at the description. I'll have the link in there for you to go donate, subscribe. Johnny, I know these were tough. These were tough topics. I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable. Hopefully, at the very least, we help other people who are maybe grieving similar things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you.
yeah, absolutely. All right. We'll talk to you
I'm
later.
sure we'll be seeing each other soon.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
All
All right.
Love
See
you,
ya.
brother.
You too.